Hi again, I am Summer and I am a alcoholic of the hopeless variety and a real drug addict. And welcome to our group. A spiritual life is not a theory, we have to live it. So that's the title of our Friday night group. So basically, real quick, I just wanted to kind of like touch base on why we're doing this, like why we decided to add a Friday night meeting. And other than the obvious that it's awesome to have a big book study, solution-based study every night of the week. We also wanted to add, this to have like a little bit of a different format, to have two people, going, together and basically kind of like the Joe and Charlie style, but working together, and each week it would be a different person. So each week we'll have a different guest come in that is well equipped to share on the big book, and along with myself. And we hope to give you a lot of hope that through this book and through this 12 steps, that the spiritual experience, or the spiritual experience that is needed, the vital spiritual experience that is needed for us to actually live a spiritual life, can be found in this book. And this book is, to me, is amazing. Like I'm not into magic or anything, but I call it magic because like every single time that I open the book and there's something different that pops out on the pages, there's some word, there's something different, or I'm going through something different. So it's like it speaks to me differently. It's as though the big book is alive. So the more book studies that we have through Big Book Compendium, the better. And so very grateful to be here tonight. And I'm very grateful that my guest tonight is Steve W. And Steve, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and maybe talk about your experience with the big book?
Sure. I am a real alcoholic and I'm a recovered alcoholic. My experience, I mean, of course, with the big book is I was taken to the big book, which helps. But when I got sober in 2000, where I live, all there was, I mean, the Joe and Charlie thing had been popular for about, 12 years at that time. And my grant sponsor was doing book studies all up and down the, Bay Area. And um, I had heard those guys in the late 90s, mid 90s, and I was far from ready. But something about it just said, wow, these guys know what they're talking about. And when I got sober, I hunted those guys down, and I didn't know that I was throwing myself in the middle of these book thumpers. And I attended every night. Back then, there was book studies at people's houses almost every night. And I got hooked on book studies and got hooked on, I was awake in the solution, trying to figure it all out at the same time, and sponsoring. And then I was given an opportunity to do a book study at a halfway house with a bunch of parolees that most of them did over 15 years in prison. And that was absolutely incredible. The first night I did that, I was scared shitless. So I honestly tell you, but the one guy goes, relax. He goes, you just didn't get caught. Okay. So, uh, that's where I got my feet wet. And then I did it at this place out here that's called Dava Valley Ranch for 17 years. Um, and up until the pandemic, and we couldn't do it anymore. But that place is magical. It's what they do, recovery dynamics. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. That's Joe McQuaney from Joe and Charlie. That's his treatment program, basically. He does, and they go to the big book and they do that. So that place, I heard a lot of footsteps. And when the pandemic happened, and I was also doing book studies in my area, of course, sponsoring guys, and pandemic hit, and someone said, hey, why don't you do my sponsees do a book study on Zoom. I didn't even know what Zoom was. And the next thing I know, I met people like Summer, and people started coming in from other countries. That Thursday night group tripled. And the Summer guy, I gave Summer my idea to start her own meetings. And then I switched the name from Big Book Compendium, it was just my meeting, to a whole brand. And since then, it's just like let go and let God. So I'm blessed to be a part of it. I'm blessed to be here and looking forward to this tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for being here with us tonight, Steve. I know Friday nights are busy, and thank you for every one of you that's here tonight. We're gonna have fun, and we're gonna kind of go around the big book, mostly in a little bit in order, but we're gonna also do a little bit of cross-referencing as well. For those of you who were here last week, it was basically the intro night, and we talked about like why we were doing the study, but we also had some really important things that we covered. We talked about the blank page and how that's how we come to Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever fellowship that we decide to come to. Our mind, it's like this is what we know at this point. It goes so well with that set aside prayer that we just said. We have to set everything aside, or I'll say I have to set everything aside in order for me to move forward. Like those old ideas that I had about what AA looked like what the big book was. Like I thought it was just like supplementary like reading, when I would sit in on meetings and stuff, and no one had big books. So like when everyone said, oh, there's a big book, I'd be like, well, whatever, I'm not buying it. I don't need it. I just need the meeting, right? So I had to set all that stuff aside this time around. I came through at the beginning of the pandemic. I didn't stay, on the straight and narrow at the beginning, but eventually through my higher power, this group, and like really, really good sponsorship, I was able to I was able to live these spiritual disciplines and work 4 through 9 and on a daily basis, and have a relationship with my higher power, who just so y'all know, if I do say God, it's just because that's like the simplest thing for me to say at this time, because I will be quite honest, I'm just learning. Like, I don't know exactly my conception of a higher power. Like, I don't know. I know my experience is growing and building. I'm much newer, or I haven't been around as quite as long as a lot of you in this room. So mine is just, becoming through experience, through the times that I have with my higher power, and through the things that I go through with my higher power on a daily basis. When I see things and he shows up and he sends people or things happen, my faith grows, and I'm beginning to have a concept of my higher power. So I just say God because it's like the easiest thing to say, but it's not meant to offend anyone at all. So I know, Steve, do you have anything to say about I know you were here last week, other than the blank page, and maybe we'll do a review of the first page, but anything that I just said, like, do you want to chime in a little bit?
I think you guys covered everything last week. I always say the blank page means 2 things. This is how much, to a new person, this is how much you know about alcohol. Recovery, and this is but most of all represents an open mind. This is about open-mindedness, and that's to take in someone else's opinion other than my own, because my ego is going to always want to be right. It's always going to want to fill the room with everything, but most of all, my egos, will fly in duality. It's always have to be opposites with everything, and I'm right, you're wrong, and so it thrives on separation. So open-mindedness is the beginning of just a little bit of getting away from that. It's a little bit of, it's tough for the new people when you try to talk about open-mindedness. You think you know what it means, but no, I think you guys covered everything last week. I think,
Okay. Well, then we'll just continue on, and real quick, for those of you who were not here, like what Steve said, is like this book that we have is a textbook, and it's mentioned within the book that it's a textbook, so it's not to be read like a novel or just once through. It's meant to be studied and studied again and again and again, and to have like to use as a reference point to help others. And it has the solution to our problem in the first 164 pages, and we'll go over exactly what each chapter is about, but I just wanted to touch on it. It was really important that I learned, because as I just shared with you all, that I kind of thought the big book was like, take it, leave it, I don't care, like it's too large, because I mean, I needed a large print and it's almost as big as me, so I was like, I'm not bringing that around with me, like I'm not doing that. So I now that I know that it's a textbook, the words are to be applied and studied, and actually take action on the principles that are in this book, and the directions and the suggestion, I don't say directions in this book, that there's a call to action that comes with that. So there's so much in this book that, like, I don't think anyone could ever stop studying it, right? Like we learn something new every single time that I'll say that I pick up the big book. Even if I'm just reading the same thing, the same page over and over, I'm reading something brand new or having a new experience. And another good thing about the book is we're able to clearly see what our problem is and what the solution is, because that didn't really click with me. I always knew what my problem was. In my eyes, I thought my problem was drinking and using drugs, and that was why I was here. But that, that had to be, again, set aside, and I had to learn that wasn't actually the problem. That was my solution for a problem that was much deeper. But this book lays out tells us what our problem is, so we can understand how, the solution. Because without a clear picture of the problem, I don't know, like I wasn't able to succeed. I just was going around and around, because I always thought the problem was me winding up at someone's house the next day that I didn't know. And that was a big problem, like how did I end up in a different country? Like, what's the problem here? Like, why am I on a cruise ship in St. Thomas when I had to work yesterday? Like, what's going on? So those were some big problems, right? But again, this book and people in the program have helped to clarify and solidify the fact that the problem is within ourselves. It's the lack of power the power that we don't have within ourselves. And it lays it out very well, like how we can become familiar through the doctor's opinion, and so on. So before I start the table of contents and we go through each of them, did you have anything to say about our first promise is listed on the first page? It says have recovered from alcoholism, that's, and that I think we didn't decide, but we found out that it is 23 times that recovered is mentioned in this book.
23.
So that's pretty important, right, Steve?
Well, recover and recovered both mean restored to health. And I always use the analogy. I had major reconstructive back surgery years ago, and 2 days after the major back surgery, a guy with a buzz cut came up in my room and says, "Get up, physical therapy starts." And after that, it was the process of recovering from that surgery. It was hard, it was rough, but once I was recovered from the surgery, I was recovered. I didn't say, "Hey, I want to go back and be recovering again." So recovering is the process. Within the 12 steps, I was recovering from a very short time. My grand sponsor used to say, I said to him years ago, I said, "Why do people say recovering?" And he goes, "Probably because they are." and he was straightforward with it. He was very straightforward with it. And but recovered, I mean, you think of like American football, right? You grab the football, they're recovering the ball, it's fumbling around. Once you have it, you have a hold of it, right? You have a hold of it. But we're going for not a football here, we're going for a higher state of God consciousness. And that's the aspect of it, and that's the deepness of what we're looking at here. Because there comes a point for every single person in here where we realize, no matter how you got here, and you start getting into the steps and you realize this is real and not a game. This is my life. And we also know what it feels like when the lights come back on. That's the most amazing thing.
Mm-hmm. Becoming spiritually awake. Awesome. Thank you. So, the definition for recovered that I have is that, I no longer think about putting the substance or substances or whatever it is in my body. And that's what recovered looks like for me. Like I no longer think about that stuff. Like I recoil like a hot from it, like a hot flame. um
One thing is, I prefer to look at it as more than a thought. It's more like an idea. It's
okay.
scholarly or recollection that I look at, because I could have an idea, I could have a thought, oh, a cold beer would be nice, but that's not an obsession.
Right.
Obsession is I'm going to do it no matter what the consequences may be.
Right. So it's not just like we're walking around and like it's like, I don't know, one of the holidays and people are out drinking and you're like, oh, that looks kind of nice. That doesn't mean we're not recovered, right? Like it's the actual obsession that has been lifted. We're no longer like in that hopeless state of mind and body. We're no longer suffering from the mental obsession. Is that what you're saying, Steve?
Yeah, we'll get into that when we look at the
Okay. Okay. All right. So awesome. So if you all want to, we're on Roman numeral V, which is 5. And we're going to just do a quick outline, since we didn't do it last week, of the table of contents. And then we're going to just kind of go over a couple of the things that we wanted to reemphasize in the preamble, and then move forward to, depending on the time, just letting the spirit lead. So, all right. So in the table of contents, we have, I have a 4th edition book here. And I have the preface, the forward to the 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 4th edition, or 4th edition. And those all are representing the Roman numerals before the actual book. So a little side note on that is that I was just talking to Tim before, he mentioned it to me about like some of how like valuable some of the information in these forwards are. And I never would have thought about that. I mean, I never read forwards or Roman numerals or like appendix, like if there was an asterisk at the bottom, I was like, oh, that's extra. Like, well, let's just keep going. I'm not reading that. That's too much. So I never really looked at the table of contents. I never really looked at like the intro to a book or the preface, however you want to, say it. And I definitely wasn't going to be reading about forwards for all of the different editions, but with this I am. And, the forward to the 1st edition has like one of the most important, if not the a very important line in it about why we do these book studies, why we use this is or why we use the big book when I don't know if I'm making sense. So hold on one second.
We're going to be there pretty soon, Summer. We don't need to explain everything. Let's get in the book, because we don't need to explain everything that we're going to explain later on.
Okay.
I don't mean to be.
No, I'm getting ahead of myself. You're right. You can use the reins and slow me down. Okay. Well, and then, okay. So the doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth, a man that, was obviously a doctor, and, he was part of, he was a non-alcoholic, and he wrote the doctor's opinion. And this is where, the problem, the physical part of our problem was introduced. So I have to be quite honest, like when I first read the doctor's opinion and when I finally like began to have some sort of awakening towards what it meant, that was where I found like my real solace, my real peace was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not this like this bad person, and I'm not that person. Like there's an actual reason for my insanity, there's a reason for my madness, sometimes. So then that is on page XXV. And Steve, I want you to tell us what you know about the doctor's opinion. Not all of it, but some of it.
Well, I mean, the majority of it it's fascinating, because you have this guy, you have to look at what was going on at that time. And Silkworth, when he wrote Doctor's Opinion, had 38 years working with 40,000 supposedly, I mean, that's may have been more than that, alcoholics, mostly at Bellevue Hospital in New York, but he was a specialist in neurology and psychiatric too. But the thing that's fascinating about it is, if you go back to this, like, it's not far off from the Civil War. The Civil War produced 250,000 morphine addicts. And all of a sudden, you had on top of that 300,000 or more, they say, alcoholics in the United States. And we were putting those people in mental institutions, but the people of the United States wanted something more, so they created what Samuel Woodward created what we call inebriate asylums. And inebriate asylums were places where there was no rules. And because alcoholics, when they first went to those wards, you couldn't do shock therapy and stuff like that on them. You couldn't tranquilize them as much, and these inebriate asylums were horrible. And they were declared inhumane in 1920. And what happened within that time, Silkworth witnessed those things, and they just wanted to look at alcoholics as rapists, thieves, and you know, and um, menace to societies. And so the easiest thing, they didn't want to hear about the body. They just wanted to hear about the mind, because we're all crazy. We can lock us up, throw away the key. And Silkworth witnessed all that. And basically, um, when that happened, when it closed, they put all those people in mental institutions. But the problem was, they made sure all those people were classified as mentally insane. And a lot of them even would get lost within the system. And when Silkworth showed up, he, declared, like, we'll say in his doc's opinion, we'll get there, it did not satisfy us to be told we're maladjusted life over outright mental defective. We knew there's something wrong with us also, something physically wrong. And his thing was, groundbreaking when he came out. And the doctor's opinion, this is, the way I always put it is, with the allergy and the obsession, I have a mind that condemns me to drink against my will, I have a body that condemns me to death. You know, if I don't stop, I will die. And that it's just so, I remember the first time I heard it was at my grand sponsor's Don's book study. And I know some people in here knew who he was. And this little guy, Terry, broke down doctor's opinion. I was just sitting there in the corner of the room, and I went, oh, wow. Why is this guy talking to me? And that's the thing about it. That's the powerless of doctor's opinion. But we'll have I think Kevin O will come in here to do his spiel on doctor's opinion. That should be really good with you.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. So, that's obviously like a little bit of the step one. And then with Bill's story, where it's number one in the big book, page number one, Bill starts talking. I mean, we see very clearly the unmanageability, as well as we see him in recovery, and what he was doing. I don't have the exact numbers of which ones, what number pages, but that were the unmanageability, and then also his spiritual experience in the hospital, and then how it all like kind of shifts, the whole story shifts into like hope.
So page 1 to 8 is the unmanageability. I like to break it down as there's 30, I call them doom curves within that, where he keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And it's a check your experience chapter, and then 8 to 16 is recovery. And it's a very powerful story. It's interesting that it was originally wasn't on page 1, doctor's opinion was, but Bill, being the man in charge, switch some things up in there. They also wanted at one point suggested to put it, move it to the stories in the back, but he didn't want that. So
of course not.
It's a good, I mean, it's a great story, but you got to remember, it's just a story, but it builds it up perfectly, especially at book studies, what we're getting into next.
Right. And I think considering that it's at the beginning of the book, it gives newcomers a chance to kind of identify, like, I mean, I know sometimes they unidentify and they say, well, I didn't do that, I wasn't a stockbroker, but there's so much to identify with Bill, and like his progression of the disease. Or I think that for me, like I found hope in Bill's story. And like when he had his spiritual experience, and then like how like he was in a hospital bed and he was asking, to work with others. Like I found hope in that story. And I don't know. And then there is a solution, is on page 17, more of step 1. So basically I'm going through the table of contents and showing you where the steps are located and what each chapter covers, which steps. So we know Bill's story was the beginning was, I guess, 1, and then the recovery was the rest of the steps. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah. So it's actually, there's parts of step 2 in there. So there's
Mhm.
17 to 26 is pretty much step 1. And then you go 27 to 29 to get into the Carl Jung story about suggesting a spiritual experience might be necessary. So there's a little bit of step 2 in there. And it's you have to look at it in a certain way. I'm trying to find something I was gonna refer to, but I can't. It disappeared.
It's convenient.
Hold on a second. So no, I mean the big thing in there is page 25. If you want to
Mhm.
cruise over there really quick, I'll
Yes.
break it down.
Um,
I
yeah,
mean,
for those,
I'll give you a sneak peek. But
yeah.
this is, the way that, a lot of people look at this differently a little bit, but like the way I was talked about the solution is, you could say the solution is spiritual experience or it's God and all that stuff like that. But the way I was, a very unique way that I was showed years ago by my sponsor was, so you look at what is the solution? You go to common math, right?
Mhm.
5 times, now when I go up in front of a rehab and I'm using the whiteboard and I say 5 times 5 is 25, what's the solution? Everyone yells out 25. I said, no, that's the answer. Then they go, well, it's 5 times 5. No, what's the solution? The solution is multiplication. It's the
Mhm.
method I use to bring me to the answer. So what's the solution? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's going to bring me to the answer. And all our answers are different. Where we wind up is different. And if you look at this paragraph, it tells us that. It says, first of all, it says there is a solution, right? And then it
Mhm.
says, almost none of us like the self-searching. It sounds like step 4, right?
Mhm.
It's a deep, soul searching self-analysis. Um, and, as Chuck C called it, to uncover, we're uncovering something there, right?
Mhm.
And and think about that. None of us like the self-searching, the leveling of pride. That could be, some people say it's step 9, some people say I say it's all 4 through 9. But think about when you like level a building. It's not the leveling of pride like a leveler. It's it's the demolishing of pride. One of our common instincts that we're looking at in step 4. The confession of our shortcomings, we know what step that is, right? And you know, that we just process for successful consummation. And consummation, many will say, oh, it means the end of something. What it really means is to achieve or complete a goal that I intend to reach. You know, I believe if you look at 1 through 5, when you do all those steps, it gives you the ability to do step 6 and 7.
Mhm.
So I'm discarding all that stuff, letting it go. And that's the thing right there. That's the main part I wanted to point out, though, is it's the methods I use, to have that successful consummation. And then I go out and I'll make an amends, and um, it's that whole thing that Chuck C talked about, uncovering step 5, discovering 5, discarding 6 and 7. And I always throw in repair in 8 and 9. But if I'm going to go out and do those first 7 steps, isn't it would make all the sense in the world to go make amends. I didn't want to make any amends until I did 6 and 7, because all of a
Yeah.
sudden, boom, it clicked. And I mean, I tried Christianity, I tried Buddhism, I tried meditation, therapy, more therapy, doctors, ministers, they were great stuff, but none delivered. All it did was trim away the branches. And when I ran out of options, I did the last thing I wanted to do, the thing I ran from. Thank God for this process. That's how we find the power. And it tells us also in we agnostics eventually where we find the power. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that in there for that. That's one of my favorite chapters in this book. And
Thank you. Yeah, 25 is good, and I mean it's definitely truth. I mean, none of us liked the self-searching. I did not like the leveling of my pride, and I had to go through the process. And like you said, Steve, there's no way I would have been able to go and make some of the amends that I did without going through the steps before that, like leveling out. Like if someone were to ask me to make amends in step 1 or 2, I mean, I would be like, no way, they owe me an amends. Like, well, no, this is not. So, it takes us through this process, and that's what the solution is. It's not, I like how you use that the math, that it's the actual multiplication that is the solution, not just the answer.
it works pretty good considering I flunked math my whole life. So.
Me too, it's okay. Okay, so then back to more about alcoholism. That is on page 30. And again, we're covering, why are we covering so much of step 1? Like, okay, so we looked at doctor's opinion, Bill's story, a lot isn't there as a solution. More about alcoholism is more of step 1. And the way that I was taught was that step 1 is the foundation of all the steps. And, we have to be convinced, we have to be, we have to concede to our innermost self, of our status at this point. I guess we need to be convinced that we are powerless, and that our life is unmanageable, and that we need a power that's greater than the substance that we were using before, because we can't just find any old power. It has to be something greater, like the highest power, something better than those substances or whatever we were reaching out to. So more about alcoholism is all step 1, right, Steve?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And the main thing that stands out, it's like we just did a whole bunch on alcoholism, and there's a lot of pages. I think it's 35 pages on step 1 and more pages on step 2. And I believe it's all about investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To carefully, we're carefully doing research and looking at this stuff. And a good analogy is let's say Marty and I go on a road trip, and we wind up in the middle of the mountains and we break down, and yeah, I don't know, we let's say we pull this out of the road to look at over the view, whatever, and then all of a sudden we get back in the car, it's like click, 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 right? We know there's a problem, the car doesn't start, but then there's why. So we go on an investigation to discover what the problem is. And we look under the hood, we mess around with the wires, we check might even check the alternator and the tires. But after a firm investigation comes to the conclusion the battery's dead. Now, here's the thing: is after we know what the problem is, do we start it for 30 years? Do we say, oh, the problem must be this? Do we check how much gas is in the car? No, we know it's a dead battery. We're without power, powerless. The solution would be that thing called power. We lack the means to fix it on our own. And so the next investigation we go on is how and where we find the power. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't have jumper cables. We're in a remote area. And all of a sudden Marty goes, hey, I got, a tow truck company I can call. So he makes a decision to call that road service. And he takes the action by calling them, and 3 hours, 4 hours later, they show up, and we get something called results. So it's about investigation, decision, action, results. And that's what it comes down to there, and our investigation, of course, begins with doctor's opinion, and then it goes on from 17 to page 60, ending with the ABCs. 52 pages all in all. That's a lot of investigation. But it's, again, this is not a game. There's, when a person walks into Alcoholics Anonymous, they don't have a clue what, I thought I had a clue what an alcoholic was. If they don't do this investigation, they're never going to know what the problem is. They're just gonna, they're not gonna have a clue. They got no solution. They're gonna think they know what the problem is, and they're gonna try all these other solutions. It doesn't say there is a solution. There doesn't say there is solutions in this book. It says there is a solution. So we have 35, like, 35 pages of investigation on one and a lot of other pages, that we do that with, but it's like, again, that's what we're doing.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, from my experience too, like when I came in, like just sharing before, I thought the problem was, the things that I was doing and like the alcoholism. So I just thought I had to change like one part of it. Like, well, I just won't do it then, or like I'll just go to work and then I'll do it on the weekends. I just won't get on cruise ships. Like I'll throw away my passport, but I'm still going to drink and use. But like the solution for me was to just kind of play God and like get in the middle and like try to figure things out. So and it says some stuff similar to what I just said, but in different ways, and stuff to relate to for myself, and I'm sure for you as well, and more about alcoholism, how we like try to, you know, um, change our drinking habits, only drink beer, wine, whatever it is. Like that's all stuff that I mean, I did through my whole 25 years. Like I'll try this drug, not that drug, this beer, this, only in the morning, this and that, and so yeah. Okay. So then going beautifully on to step 2 with We Agnostics is on page 44. And this is the chapter where we find out that the power actually is inside of us. And we don't have to go searching anymore outside. We don't have to go somewhere else to find that power, even though our problem we learn is lack of power. The power deep down inside of us is with us that we need. So that I mean for me that's what it was like huge in We Agnostics. And what about you, Steve? Anything
So,
on We Agnostics?
well, you have to look at look at the title of the chapter, We Agnostics, and it's you have many different type, not many, but I mean you have the atheist, who's someone who rejects the idea of God.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the agnostics, who are kind of like maybe, maybe not, skeptics, but they all are, you know, you have to look at the other thing is the believers, right? And if belief is something that's handed to you, right? And then lastly, they call that theism. And then there's uh Gnostic, and that's to know.
Mm-hmm.
And anything you know in life comes from experience, anything else is a theory. And we love theories and beliefs. We love stuff. And my friend asked me
Mm-hmm.
years ago, he goes, do you want belief or do you want knowledge? Do you want to know about God or do you want to know God? And I'd never heard anyone talk like that before. And I never heard, I went to Catholic school. Well, I thought when I went to Catholic school from when I was, well, catechism all the way up into Catholic school, and then all the altar boy, every single holy day of obligation, everything there was to go with it. And I never heard God was with it. I thought when I got sober, I thought God was an old man up in the clouds, and I thought that um if you don't if you do, my mom said, if you do bad things, God's gonna punish you. And if you don't, if you don't pray, you go to hell. And so it was like this punishing aspect of God. And that scared me a lot. And then I remember my sponsor going to that page 55, and to me that's like the golden page to me. That's when he said the great reality is within you. And he goes, you know why that's capitalized? And he goes, they're talking about God. And I mean, I'm far from a scholar of other spiritual books. And, I've read them, Bhagavad Gita's and the Bible and everything like that. And when I went to my friend's house, he did a Bible study once, and he was doing all of the God within parts of the Bible. I went, wait a minute, that's in there? How did I miss that?
Yeah.
you know and it was just like, because I was this, but what it did for me was it destroyed that child's conception that I was holding on to at 31 years old. It was like a window falling out and shattering on the ground, and immediately I wasn't free or anything like that. It gave me that, just a little bit of hope that I needed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of hope, and the open-mindedness that you'd be there, and all of a sudden there it was. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
let's do this. It was like, yeah, very, very powerful. It was a very powerful chapter, in there. I mean, you got stuff on the Wright brothers and all that. And the fascinating thing I always found about the Wright brothers thing is all these preachers and all these scientists said they couldn't fly, and they did, and they all lost their jobs. They all lost their jobs when that happened. All the preachers, there was a preacher out of New Hampshire, I think it was, that preached about, I don't know what he said, something about the devil or something like that, making them fly and everything. And when they flew, then no one came to his church anymore. And scientists had, I can't remember who it was. One of you guys might know, the scientist that wrote in New York, the New York Times, whatever it was, and apologizing. And his whole life work had to be reevaluated. It's pretty interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting chapter. It's a very powerful chapter. When I first read it, I said, what's this going to be about?
Mhm. Yeah, well, when I first without a sponsor, when I first came in, and I did finally land a book in my presence, like I was like, we agnostics skip, like I have a relationship with, I go to church, so I'm gonna skip that chapter, because like that, I didn't think it applied to me, because again, those old ideas and the things that I was living my life by was that if I went to church, that meant that I was okay, like even though my life was not okay and everything, it wasn't working for me at all, but like that was one of the chapters that I was like, I think I'll skip that one, because I already go to church, so which has nothing to do with spiritual. I mean, it can, but it did not in my circuit, in my life. It did not. Me going to church was not what was not a solution for me, as far as finding a power greater than myself. It was more like a legalism thing, but anyways, and then we get into the meat and potatoes of the book, and that's 58, how it works. We start talking about 3 and 4, the actor, and just basically the beautiful 3rd step prayer that like a lot of us maybe know or have memorized or are familiar with or use. That's in there, and then we get the directions for like where everything changes. Step 4, where we're able to do inventory and we're able to see some truth. We get down to causes and conditions, which is why we're here, right? We're not here to just like journal and write out things and stuff like that. Like, I know for me, I want to get down to causes and conditions. I want to know what's going on. Step 4 has been a breakthrough for me. It has, inventory has been everything that I was told it would be, it was, and more. So I trust the people around me that told me about this. And then, yes, so it's just 3 and 4, right? And how it works, Steve. And then,
So, well, the first, the way I look at it is 58 to 60 is really like the introduction to it all. It's kind of like it talks about rigorous honesty, complete honesty.
mhm.
This book mentions words like entire psychic change, entirely honest, or complete, about wholeness, right? And it's not nothing like that's impossible. But Bill created this amazing. Well, I don't know if he created it, but it's amazing inventory aspect that really gets us. I mean, some guy asked me years ago, what if step 3 had to have God remove our defects of character? We would admit like 2 things. We had to have an inventory, we had to discuss it with another person, and it's all exactly the way it's perfect. And the the interesting thing about that is he wrote how it works up into the ABCs in about, the way he said 15, 20 minutes, and he counted the steps, and it was 12. And the interesting thing is the 2 days before he did that, he went to Samuel Shoemaker, this co-founder of the Oxford Group, and asked him to write the expanded version of the steps. And what Shoemaker told him was that it's got to come from you. This is Alcoholics Anonymous, not some preacher guy doing it. And these guys love Shoemaker. I mean, he was very amazing guy. I mean, Shoemaker was very smart, but you know, the 3rd step wasn't a part of the original 6 steps, but it was, because they would get guys down on their knees. It was just, it's something we do already. Let's put in there. And it's when they put the book together too, this, the backtrack on we agnostics, Bill's, did the three separate committees of the conservative members, which was the evangelical Christians, and then the radical members, which was like good old Hank and these guys that were the atheist agnostics, and then you had the what they call liberal ones, and they were more laid back and in the middle. And when they did, by the time when they finally got the we agnostics, and Bill brought we agnostics to them, Bill's felt he told someone he wanted to throw the book out the window. He says they didn't want to listen to anything I had to say, but he could always talk himself into it. These guys had a no-fail attitude. They knew they're onto something big. And when they got to how it works, the pressure was on, because if he messed it up, and the urban legend is that he read the 12 steps to those guys, and it got really quiet in the room. And someone yelled out, "Why on our knees?" for step, which original step 7. And someone else said, "Why 12?" And what they meant, what they recognized was he read 8, and then he read 9, and someone says there's 2 amends to make, because they thought that 8 was 9, was the amends. And then all of a sudden he says no, he explained about the loophole process, that we need to get these guys to write the amends list and then do it. And a lot of them didn't get it, right away. And then of course, from what he wrote on the little scratch piece of paper, is I just read this recently, and then he brought them to those guys, the steps, and they morphed into, eventually would go to the manuscript and go to the secretary and get typed out and then tweaked again. The only ones that never changed, 2 steps that never changed from what he originally wrote down, was 4 and 10, because he refused to change them. He wouldn't let them. He says nope. He had step 4 written out, how, the breakdown of 4, and I mean just this formal step, and they wanted to change it, wanted someone to say something different. And then step 10, he knew how important it was. But I mean, you have in here, page 60 to 63. It's only 3 pages, but you think about it, is, I mean, at the rehabs I've sponsored guys at, one of them is a little chapel, and we'll do a book study, and we'll take our sponsees up to the chapel, sometimes multiple of them, and do a third, do those 3 pages with them. One of us will read it, and then we get them all down to do the 3rd step. And you can imagine what it's like when we cover those pages in the book, and we always tell them, hey, we're going to be doing some formal 3rd steps, and the whole room shows up, like 50 people in the room, and everyone around the room says a step. And then I know there's a lot of meetings where they'll pull people in the back room and do that. I love that. And step 4, I mean, all I got to say is definite example, something that's you can't argue with, a definite example. If people want to change it, people will say it's different. People want to say there's 7 columns and stuff like that, but we'll get into that when we get there.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. Okay, into action is all the way. It starts with step 5 and all the way to 11. And that's, I mean, I don't really have much to say on that, other than is where the actions, it's where we start taking action. It doesn't say into like studying, and it's into action. And this is where we actually start doing things, because 1 through 3, not necessarily at those are action steps, but like where we really start taking action and following the instructions and suggestions is where things for me started to change. And I'm sure some of you could agree with that. But yeah. Anything to say on into action, Steve, or should I just keep going?
Well, what's interesting, it doesn't say into thinking, right? But you hear a lot of stuff in the rooms. Do 1 step a month. I would be dead. I'm
Oh,
dead. If it was 1 step a month. Some people say go slow, take a break. Well, this is, look how it's 72 to 88. That's not a lot of pages, but it contains 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. It says it all right there. And there's words like now and move forward, and and when we get it done, it's a first opportunity.
yeah.
And if you look at that, look how many pages there are, 76 to 84. So 72 to 75 is step 5, 70, one little paragraph on 76, but they tell you to read the 12 and 12 before you do and really confuse people. But there's one little paragraph. I think it's 60 words with 13 lines or something like that. And it's beautiful. And it says, let God remove these defects of character. Let God. And then you say defects of character, says everything we just admitted is objectionable.
Mm-hmm.
And they got 76 to 84, step 9. And
Yep.
like David G and David G did it today, and they had to try to cram all that in 1 hour. But it was great. I mean, the thing about it is, I mean, the thing that got me in that chapter is the alcoholic is like a tornado, roaring to the lives of others. And I mean, tornadoes travel thousands of miles an hour. But at some point, you look what it did. And then step 10 is 84 to 85. Perfect directions in there, awesome promises. We cease fighting anyone, even alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
One of my dear friends who passed away years ago, and this is a bold statement he made, and he meant it. He said, "Can you call yourself recovered if you're still fighting people and anything, anyone, even alcohol?" He goes, "Some people just because the obsession's gone or think it's gone, that they can call themselves recovered. But if I'm still fighting things, we all fight things once in a while, but we got to get down on paper again and look at it, let it go." But that was a bold statement there. If I'm still fighting this stuff, and then we have 85 through 88, and it's a 24-hour plan, which is it's people want to say it's inventory in there and all that. I'd say, the inventory says step 10, but that's a whole other thing for another day. It's an awesome chapter, though. I mean, it's when you take someone that's interested in doing this process of having the awakening, you get to take them through that. It's amazing. What's even more amazing when you watch them do it with someone else. That's just, it gives me goosebumps thinking about that.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's truly a gift. And like, I mean, 86 through 88 has like many specific instructions. And I love how it says that, we will find out that it will become a working part of our mind. And like just recently, I actually like kind of saw that like I never knew that there was that 86 through 88 had, I mean, I knew that it was instructions, but I just knew that I was told I need to read it in the morning and, practice it, pray the things like for God to take away, separate me from certain things and, all that. But like now, like my vocabulary and the things that I do, like I pause. It's become a working part of my mind, like I don't just like run into things and like I don't just like snap all the time anymore. So it's cool to see when these instructions, if because we're undisciplined, and we need these instructions, but when we start doing the instructions and they become a way of life, it becomes a working part of our mind, and it's like all of a sudden we're just doing it. It's just pretty cool. Anyways, I could talk about that, but okay. So, and then chapter 7 is working with others on page 89. You'll find, step 12 there. And that's, what you said yesterday, Steve. It was the first time I've heard it, but I really,
I don't really look at it as 12 as much as I look at it as
Mhm.
you're classifying, you're trying to find
Yeah.
someone to classify their alcoholic. And when someone asks me, like, will come to me and say, "Hey, there's nothing in the big book that shows you how to sponsor."
Mm-hmm.
We just showed you all those pages just now.
Yeah.
The rest of the big book is, you have, here's the thing that some guy explained to me years ago. You have the steps on the wall on page 60, right? That's the short form steps. So where's the long form steps in the book? The long form is everything we have, in there. The rest of the book shows you how to sponsor. When this book was written, they wrote it that they didn't look at it as a sponsorship guide or a guide to take people through steps. They wanted to go to other areas so people could do it. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't Clarence Snyder and those guys in Cleveland started taking people to the book, and it just kind of got contagious that way. And it's perfect. It's perfect like that. There's amazing stuff in that chapter. He's telling us exactly, but there's nothing in there because they didn't know how to do that yet. I mean, I went to a archivist thing and these guys spoke, and one thing that stood out to me the most about these early guys, he says none of them, he goes, barely any of the first 100 ever even did all 12 steps, because they were doing Oxford group steps and then they had their 6-step program. It would be like, imagine you're spiritually, the guy, this is what this guy said, imagine you're spiritually awake through 6 steps and all of a sudden someone goes, guess what? There's 6 more now. You know what I mean? You're
Yeah.
already covering that stuff anyways, mostly.
Yeah.
It just over time, this book has, and look where it's, look, we're sitting here on a Friday night breaking down the table of contents,
Mhm.
you know, pretty awesome.
Yeah. And in working with others, like one thing that I do like this line where it talks about like we continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady, talking about the conditions of the body and the mind that accompany it, because you know what, it's so easy just to well, I'm not even going to say forget, like we as we'll be reading, we'll learn that, you know, we won't even remember the things we did a couple weeks ago, and we won't remember the bad things that happened, the good things. So like I need someone, and like the family that I have in this program and my sponsor, like I'm and my higher power, I need to be reminded that I'm suffering from a fatal malady and I'm on a life or death errand here. So like when someone tells me to just sit down and not worry about my amends and do them later, that doesn't match for me, because it's a life or death errand, you know what I mean? um and I do suffer from a fatal malady, and if it's not going to pop up the way that it used to in my life, it's going to pop up another way if I don't have a spiritual solution. So if it's not going to pop up as alcohol and drugs, it'll find some other way to surface. The ego will surface some other way if I'm not practicing these principles. And I see that in my life, you know, like that's what happens. It like finds this other way to come out, and it's like I'm gonna, yeah. But anyways, and then real quick, because I know it's 9 o'clock. 2 wives, the family afterward, and 2 employers. Can I just like put them together as, you know, it's like how, you know, how we, you know, great suggestions. Like there's lots of little treasures and great things in those 3 chapters, but
The interesting thing
it's
about To the Wives is Bill had asked Lois to write it and she
mhm.
could do with it. And so he wrote it. And then it was not, people downplay those chapters a lot. And sometimes I cover them, sometimes I don't.
Mhm.
Not because I dislike them, but I'm used to doing stuff at rehabs. And I asked my sponsor one time, why don't we cover those? And he goes, because we got to keep these guys on the steps. And there's steps in there. But like To the Employers, that was written by Hank Parkhurst,
Mhm.
unbeliever, and you know he was Bill's right hand man, salesman, and without this book, without Bill, what they say, without Bill, the book wouldn't be written. Without Hank, the book would never got published. And he was a fascinating guy. And um, you know, and there's are good chapters. There's good stuff in there. There's and to the I think To the Wives, you know, gives us further classifications of more drunks and stuff
Mhm.
like that in there. So there's good stuff in there. And um, I don't spend as much time in there as the other parts of the book.
Yeah.
And
I
there's
mean,
don't forget A Vision for You. That's like the wrap up.
yes. And then we'll wrap up with the last chapter. A Vision for You, chapter 11 on page 151. And I mean, when I think of vision, I think of Bill Wilson. I mean, like he was such a visionary. And so like how the vision and how it all manifested and actually came to fruition, like just boggles me. And I was talking about it last night in the meeting, like how the synchronicity of everything. And like, but the vision for you is, you know, like the vision that we have as living out our lives, and what we can look forward to, I guess. And the the best line for me is when we abandon ourselves to God, as we understand God, admit our faults to Him and to your fellows, clear away the wreckage of your past, give freely of what you find, and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us, not to sound, I mean, yeah, some of us, as you trudge the road of happy destiny. So that's always been one of my favorite lines, because when I learned about the difference between the fellowship and the program, and that if I just abandon myself to God as I understand him. Like even right now, I don't understand him, but if I abandon myself to that power, the power that's greater than me, admit my faults to my fellows, clear away the wreckage of the past 4 through 9, and give freely of what I find, and give back. I'm that this is it. Like that's like it's right. I mean, those are kind of just sums it up for us, doesn't it? So that's what I was trying to say. Do
One thing
you,
I
since
was,
it's 9:10, go ahead, Steve.
I
Sorry.
was gonna mention about, vision for you is only spiritually awake people have visions like
Mhm.
talking about, and it's written by a visionary, and I just want to mention, because it's important. I can never, always say, oh, maybe I should mention it, but there's stories in the back of the book. All they are stories. People want, you'll hear people quote bondage from self, go pray off your resentments for 2 weeks and all this stuff. And it's good suggestions, but I mean, why would I not want to do it? I need to do inventory on it and keep doing the process if I have a resentment. You know, I don't have time if I spend, if I like the way I explain is you can't be angry and be God reliant at the same time. So it's like, how can I pray it away? And it's like, I'll pray for people afterwards and stuff like that, but I got to do the work. And I think the guy meant that when he was saying that, but people take words and that's their program. There's a lady that speaks out here. I love her to death, but that whole thing right there is her program. That's all she does. Doesn't do the steps or anything. That's her program. The other one, of course, is acceptance is the answer to all my problems. And it's a big one. I mean, acceptance might be the answer to some of my problems. But if my neighbor's dog craps in my lawn every single day, and I accept that, my lawn's gonna be full of crap. I can't do that. I gotta do this work. And there's people out where I live, that's their whole thing. I got sponsees and I you know, love my sponsees. And sometimes I want it more than they do. I just talked to a guy today and I said, when we're gonna, you need to do some inventory on this job firing he went to. And he just started reading acceptance as the answer to my problems. And it ain't gonna get him where he needs to go. You know, it's kind of like ignoring it in a sense. But the guy that wrote that did not mean it to be put on coffee mugs and shirts and stuff. If you read the whole, there's a good breakdown somewhere online about the guy that wrote it and what it really means, and it really shoots down. And he wasn't happy about the way it was accepted, so to speak. Acceptance was accepted. But I mean, the thing about it is this, it, like I said, it kind of falls into the category of powers of people, places, and things. Every once, my friend always says, every once in a while, something's got to show up to pee in the soup a little bit, and I'm it's hard sometimes. I love the stories in the back of the book, but that's just what they are. I love the stories of the first edition the most. Second edition are good. Third edition, I have a dear friend, Dr. Earl, lives about 30 miles away from me. He wrote Dr. Heal Thyself. Amazing guy. I got to interview him with 55 years of recovery for a school project years ago. And he said something to me that blew my mind. He said, because I met him in a meeting and before I interviewed him, and he took his big book out. I don't have one near me. He took it out and he goes, "You know what this is?" I said, "It's a big book." And he goes, "It's Alcoholics Anonymous. We just left the fellowship. This is Alcoholics Anonymous." And he held the big book right against my forehead. And I was like, oh man. And it's like, you know, he told me something that night, and he died like maybe 6 months later. He said something. He said, when AA was in their heights in the 40s and 50s, there was one Alcoholics Anonymous. And they both, there were two Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship and the book, and they both represent the same exact thing. And he goes, now you have two separate things. You have a fellowship where not everybody's on the same page, and you have a big book they can't change. They're trying to change it though. You got the plain language big book seminar on Sunday on here. They want to change a bunch of words, and I don't think it's going to be in the fifth edition, but you might want to check that out. It says it says only 1,000 people can enter. I go, whoa. I go, it's a big meeting. So anyways, that's enough out of me. I just wanted to mention that stuff.
Oh, Steve, thank you so much. I love your knowledge and experience with everything. And yeah, we managed to cover the table of contents tonight. And you know, like Steve said, I would personally would not want to be anywhere else but with you guys. So thank you for everyone for coming tonight. Since I mean, we're going to open up the room for questions and answers.